You're listening to the Bible Thumping Wingnut Show, the show that's safe for the whole family.
Unless your family contains professing atheists.
I will say to everyone who is in the mood to write in and complain about anything this week, stop. Don't do it. Okay? There's no reason to. Just don't. Don't complain about it. If you don't like it, stop watching. Okay? It's a voluntary thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we may have a new crazy apologist on the block. I present to you Bible Thumping Wingnut.
Bible Thumping Wingnut. I'm like, where do I know that name? You're that guy who said that atheists don't exist.
Bible Thumping Wingnut is manipulative, dishonest, ineffective, and completely incapable of seeing women as equal human beings.
Hey, Bible Thumping Wingnut, stay in your man cave and keep studying the book written in the Bronze Age.
Well, what have we got here? What do we have here? Bible Thumping Wingnut.
Don't you stay away from me, never misunderstand me, keep away from me.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast. Today is a Sunday and we are in a live Google Hangout. And we are going to discuss, whether evolution is true or false. Joining me this week is the driving force behind the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, the Bible Thumping Wingnut YouTube channel. Everyone has discovered the voice behind the name Bible Thumping Wingnut is actually Striving for Eternity. Bible Thumping Wingnut, a ministry of Striving for Eternity. Andrew Rappaport, how are you this evening?
Good, Tim. How are you, man?
I am good. I'm good.
It's a Sunday night, and Mr. Slick is out doing flying out for some debates and things.
He's missing in action.
I've been combing the news, looking for the news that Matt Slick was arrested at Joel Osteen's church.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's going there this morning.
That's what he said, and I think I could be wrong, but I think he's in the same town as Matt Dillahunty, and Matt dodged him again.
Uh-oh.
Dillahunty practiced that dodge again. Wow.
Interesting. He's good at that.
It's what he does best.
Yeah. Well, let me see here. Let's see if we've got do we have anybody in here who's going to show up? Let's just put that invitation out there. And as the evening goes by, I'm going to ask Christians who normally show up. I'm going to ask you to drop out to let other people come in should the room fill up. But we want to have people who believe that evolution is true to come and make a case that evolution is true. And we just might have a special guest show up. I'm not sure about that, but stay tuned.
At the top of the hour.
Stay tuned. But
so we want atheists. We want people to convince us that evolution is true, right?
Yes.
Give us your best argument.
Yeah, because
for evolution.
I have never heard 1 ounce of evidence that evolution is true. Now, I've never seen it. Never seen one ounce of evidence that evolution is true. So let's we've only got one guest so far that I think takes the position that evolution is true, and that is, man, I forget your Gary. Gary from the UK. It's kind of late over there where you live, isn't it, Gary?
It's about just past 1:15.
1:15. Don't you have to get up and go to work tomorrow?
Nope, I'm off all week.
Nice.
Okay, so all right, Tim, I'm going to ask you a question. Define evolution for me.
Evolution is. I just looked that up today when I spelled it. I want to make sure I spelled it right. Evolution. Without looking it up, was it the changing of one kind to another over a process of time? I believe it's the concept that mankind and all kinds came from millions of years process of changing over time from just little bacteria into what we have today. How's that?
Inaccurate, but
All right.
but again, I'll give you my definition, and then we can argue from that. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay, I'll go from the scientific definition, which is the theory of evolution is that alleles will change in a population over time. Allele frequencies will change in a population. That is the scientific definition of evolution.
Wait. The scientific definition you're saying is that animals will change over time?
No. Alleles. Allele frequencies. Allele frequencies.
Maybe it's your accent. I'm not understanding what.
Sorry, allele frequencies. Do you know what
is that?
Gary, do you disagree with this definition?
Yes, because it's not the definition that we give. What you're arguing for is the definition.
I didn't read it yet, Gary. Gary, I didn't read it yet.
He's disagreeing with you before you even read it.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the definition you gave before. Sorry.
The process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth.
Okay, but that's not the definition of scientific definition or what people mean when they say the term evolution. What you're talking about is the theory of common descent.
Type in your definition so I can see it. So I understand the word.
Okay, I'll mute my mic.
You don't have to mute your mic.
Maybe
if he mutes his mic, then we're just talking to each other while he's typing.
Yeah, that's
okay. So, a change. Well,
change in allele frequency over time.
Change.
That is right.
ALLEA.
Yeah, allele.
And so what's that?
It's. I don't have time to go into what an allele is. It's basically like small changes in a bacteria, for example. Like, for example, bacteria multiplying, or for example, becoming different types of bacteria. That is a change in allele frequency.
Well, according to the Urban Dictionary, an allele is a cute and funny-looking thing that sometimes shy personally and immense charm and thwarted about 5 seconds after she opens her mouth, except for the charm. There's nothing cute as charming as an allele. So, I guess I'm not being very convinced by that.
But that's a scientific definition which has been proved.
So so you're saying the scientific definition is that a cute and funny-looking thing that sometimes shy, personally, and immensely charmed, thwarted about 5 seconds after she opens her mouth, except for the charm. There is nothing quite as charming as an allele changes over time.
No, I'm saying that in a population, allele frequency happens.
Well, why can't you define, if this is a core part of your definition, why can't you define what, I mean, I'm Googling it. I see allele is the all-European academics.
No, allele frequency is gene variation in a population. Look at the definition that John's just given you, which talks about it. I mean, again, do you know what gene frequency is?
Wait a minute.
That as well.
Why are you giving us, Gary? Why are you giving us all these labels? Why are labels? Why are you?
Because if you're going to discuss something, it's important that you discuss it correctly. It seems like your problem isn't with the definition, with evolution, but with the theory of common descent.
That's not necessarily true.
We can't even get you to define what it is yet. I mean,
Okay.
you gave a definition. I asked for clarity on a word that I couldn't even find, and I give you the definition that comes up on Google, and you say that's not right, and you're saying it's too scientific for you to be able to give me.
No, I'm saying that. Do you know what gene frequency is?
Where I'm asking for you to be able to explain.
All right,
this.
I'll define it for you.
Can you give us Gary, can you give us any evidence that evolution is true?
Yes.
Anything at all? Anything else?
Yes. We've studied it in science labs.
Okay.
So
that makes it true?
Yes, it does make it true because
Gary, you're telling me that evolution is true because you studied it.
No, I'm saying that it's true because you use it every day when you do your medicines, when you
That's not evolution.
That is evolution.
That is just an assertion on your part.
No, it's true. I can prove it. You said you wanted proof, I can give you it. Okay. Now the thing is that what you may not know is that all the things that we have that attack us evolved to attack us better. Now I don't know whether you know. Have you? Right. Let me finish.
You're making unproven assertions, one right after another.
No. This is something that can be tracked through human history. Have you heard about the what's it called? The thing in Kenya. What's it called now? The big thing that kills you.
That's the best argument you
blob?
have, Gary.
No.
Gary,
No.
the best
It's a disease. I'm blanking on the name. It's God. The thing that they've. God, why am I blanking on the name?
Gary, are you going to make an argument?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we don't have a lot of time here, so.
Okay. All right. There are a couple of things that point to it. The fact that bacteria, including known diseases, grows and adapts to attack our bodies better.
That is not evidence.
Yes, it is. Because that's called evolution. It evolves. It adapts to attack our bodies better.
So by your definition, if I take the word where and I remove one letter, it's still a word. Therefore, it evolved. Therefore, evolution.
No, it's adaptation.
So you're saying adaptation is evolution.
Again, just because you lost something doesn't mean that you haven't better evolved to you're not better evolved. That means you're more evolved to attack something. Because, for example, we at one time would have had tails because we evolved from apes. Now we lost that tail because it was no longer necessary for our survival, or it was unnecessary for our continued survival. So therefore, at one time, our tail fell off.
Okay. And that is not convincing at all. Your tail fell off, and that proves evolution because your tail fell off? I don't even think that you can prove your tail fell off.
No, how do you even prove we had a tail?
Humans,
it's an assumption.
Humans still have it today.
We have a tail?
Yes.
But you said it fell off.
Yeah, well, some people still have it.
They still have a tail.
That proves evolution. That proves evolution.
Google people with tails. You'll see it. It has vertebrae in it. Some of them can actually move it.
And I'm not sure that is a cogent argument at all.
How so? It shows that we have a common ancestor with apes.
How does that have anything to do with apes?
Well, apes.
I mean, kangaroos have tails. Giraffes have tails. So the fact they have a tail makes them an ape?
No, it shows a common ancestry. It calls back to a common ancestry. I mean, there's more than the tail.
Look, I asked for evidence, not assumption.
Okay. The lazy gene.
I'm trying to go with the evidence.
The lazy gene.
Oh man, I love them big hulks. Oh yeah, shove them in. Oh.
Gary, let me ask you a question. Could there be another explanation?
No. Because
there cannot be. How do you know there can't be another explanation?
Because, right, we both believe in God, Tim. Well, I hope we both do.
Gary.
No.
Just nut. I'm about to nut.
Sorry. I'm surprised nobody kicked that guy out yet.
No, they're just that person is coming in and saying it as before we get a chance to eject them and permanently remove them. So coming in on different accounts.
Okay. Gary, how do you know there's not another explanation?
Okay, because the genes have been mapped, and the thing is that our DNA is so similar to that of an ape and other monkeys and other primates that it's only one genetic difference.
So there cannot be another explanation.
Okay, what's the explanation?
It's
what
not
explains the genetic difference?
Gary, it's not convincing at all. I reject that.
Well, there's plenty of other things that could have been. I mean, even Dawkins said it could be aliens. Maybe it was space monkeys that did it.
Oh God Almighty! You do understand that what he was doing was making fun of creationists, right?
So you're saying there can't possibly be any other possibilities?
No, I'm not saying that they couldn't. I'm saying that this
that was the
seems
question
more
that was asked.
cogent possibility.
No, oh, so it had. If you agree with it, that makes it cogent.
No.
Okay, so you use a definition that's so wide that it captures anything.
Okay, but if it was so bad as you say, that it wouldn't come up with anything useful at the end of it, would it?
So let's get real specific. Because your definition is so wide so that you can take adaptation, which is real science, and use it for what isn't real science. So we're asking you where in the laboratories do you have the evidence, the proof, that one kind of animal changed into another kind, not a bacteria remaining a bacteria. I'm looking for your evidence. You said you have
it with the lazy gene.
The gene.
The lazy gene. Do you know what the lazy gene is? Right, it's called chromosome 2. Now, in apes, that they have 48 pairs of chromosomes. We have 40. I think it's 47. Now, 46. And the reason is chromosome 2 has fused. Now, if you look at the genetics types, they're exactly identical.
Where did you observe that? Where did you observe that fusion happen?
I've been in numerous labs where I've looked at it.
You've seen you watched it actually fuse?
Pardon?
You watched it actually fuse?
Did I watch it fuse? No, but I looked at
okay, so who watched it fuse?
That's ridiculous.
But we see the two that have. We see the human DNA, and we see the ape DNA.
No. Look. I didn't ask for your religious beliefs and assumptions. I asked for evidence. What you just gave me is an assumption. You're saying it just happened. I asked you who saw. I'm looking for evidence. Convince me. Give me the evidence. Where is it?
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. That was not convincing at all.
That's almost like a fairy tale, thinking that frogs can become men.
He just came in here and made assumption after assumption without giving anything that's convincing in any way. I hope there's somebody else in here.
I'm looking for the evidence, not the assumptions.
I see. Is there anybody else here who wants to talk about this? I haven't been watching the chat. Oh, no, there isn't. Thought there might be.
Okay, I'm looking for someone to convince me. See, and this is the thing. What you end up seeing, he gives this definition that's just so broad to include anything. I mean, I change every day. I mean, I look in the mirror, I changed. Where's the actual evidence? And the assumptions, and this is the thing. Tim, why is it that these guys that believe in evolution don't have evidence, they have assumptions? I mean, do they have more than that?
I think they're delusional. They really do. I haven't heard any good arguments at all.
Yeah, I think it's true what and I'm trying to remember who said this, but the only change that happened in evolution is that we start teaching it to children and brainwashing them at a young age so that they believe it's true, because that's what they've been brainwashed to believe at a young age. And now that we have multiple generations, they're just believing what their parents believe. That's all.
Yeah,
they're believing it because that's what their parents believed.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody else will come in here, because people they shouldn't just believe assertions that people make. They need to learn to be skeptical thinkers. Don't just take somebody's claim or experience. He started telling us about his experience going to the lab, and when you called him out on it, well, no, not actually, I didn't see that. I want to hear some evidence. I want to hear something convincing. Hog Tie's here. see what he's got to say.
I am here. I was out in the yard doing some yard work, and at minus 25 Celsius, it's not the best time to be doing yard work, but it's got to be done. I actually was listening while I was in the yard, and I had not intended on joining initially, but I wanted to come in with a plea to Gary, Phony Beetle Maniacs. Please don't go into Hangouts and discuss evolution till you learn something about it. I say that. I mean, I respect the guy. I think I like his attitude in Hangouts. I like that, you know, he's a truth seeker, but he doesn't do any reading on evolution, and then he pops into these Hangouts and he just says,
"You're actually making my argument, Hogtie. How can I believe in evolution when the two of you, who both subscribe to evolution, can't agree?"
But wait.
Okay. Hogtie, we're done. Good. Christianity's done. That's awesome. That's awesome. You just ended Christianity. Thank you.
He said he had a scientific definition. So wouldn't that be the authority?
No. I'm going to address Tim's point now, and that's because it's so silly. You should know. It's to say that there are two people that have a different understanding of something means that thing is necessarily not true, is to strike Christianity out completely. It's the weakest argument I've ever heard anyone make against any belief set at all.
That's a non sequitur right there of why you're doing Christianity.
Why don't you just
Somebody block that guy. Somebody please get that guy out of here.
I wish we could do IP blocking. That would help.
Yeah. So, do I need to give more people control so they can get rid of him when he comes in?
Yeah, I'll be looking too.
Yeah. If you guys who claim to understand evolution, the people who understand it. Now,
wait, Tim.
If you guys claim to understand Christianity, etc., etc., can we move past it? Can we move past it?
Hold on one second. Yeah. He said he gave a scientific definition. So how could you disagree with it?
Oh, well, what he calls a scientific definition. I mean, it was slightly better than going to UrbanDictionary.com to come up with a definition for allele.
Well, that was funny, but that was the first one that came up.
Was it tongue-in-cheek? Okay.
No. Actually, it was the first thing that came up.
Yeah. Well, let's start with allele and gene just to clean up that mess.
Wait. No. Okay. You're saying that his definition is wrong, but he said it's the scientific definition.
Well, he can say it's a scientific definition. Well, I mean, if I were to sort of start this conversation again, I want to approach this conversation as I always do when I join the show, sometimes to my disappointment and the disappointment of the audience, as if we're having like an actual normal conversation with people who have the best intentions to get to understand other people's opinions. I would say, I was going to say now, too much preamble, sorry guys. There is a problem with when we measure evolution. Okay, good, very clever. There is an issue with.
Okay, I ejected him this time.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to say. So there's an issue with the terms evolution and common ancestry, and I can say it very, very simply: everybody accepts evolution, including creationists. And especially if you're a Bible-believing creationist, you have to accept evolution, or the whole Noah's flood story goes out the window. Unfortunately, evolution has kind of become shorthand for the word evolution has become shorthand for the notion of common ancestry. People say man. That's why you hear these modifiers like monkeys to man evolution or molecules to man evolution. That's the issue that you guys have, right? You accept evolution. You believe. Let's get on the table what you already believe. So you already believe that species can change over time. That certain animals can get longer fins or.
Okay, I neither can confirm or deny it.
Well, you must, or you wouldn't believe.
I don't know. I don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know if it's a cogent argument, really.
It's not an argument. I'm asking a question about whether or not you believe what I would say is the obvious. So, for example, do you believe that all dogs? Do you believe that all dogs have a common ancestor? And when I say dogs, let's mean domestic dogs. Let's not get confused.
I'm not making any claims, Hogtie.
Oh, okay. So you're not here to. Are you here to have an honest conversation? Okay.
See me.
They're coming in now on multiple accounts.
I don't know why Google doesn't have it. I mean, you've got this cameraman option. So why is it not the case that when somebody comes in that they simply can't?
If you show up with a well, here it is, folks. If you want to know how to.
Oh no.
Well, yeah, don't tell. But there are certain ways around it. But
See you later.
cameraman the cameraman options does have some problems, and so this person is creating new accounts, and I guess.
Right.
Hogtie, I'm not sure you're the right guy to make this argument tonight.
Oh, I see why. Well, I don't know what you're trying to do then.
Hopefully somebody else will come in who can give evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're asking us to support what we believe and asking us what we believe. I'm looking for evidence.
Yeah, I can do that. But what I'm saying is, I'm asking what you want evidence for. Do you want evidence for evolution, or do you want evidence for common ancestry?
I want evidence that proves evolution. Reason why I should believe in evolution.
Well, I guess
because it's in the Bible.
To be fair with Hogtie, he's being way more technical than Gary was, to say the least. Right. So he's giving some definitions, Tim, which which I think Hogtie, to be honest, is we're agreeing that Gary's definition was so wide that it included anything, and no one could possibly disagree with it. But it's not what the argument's over. So Hogtie's trying to bring it into where we would disagree, or where he thinks we would disagree, right?
Well, what I'm trying to do is get it past the point. I mean, having had this discussion a number of times, I know that there's a real sticking point, and that is that when you use the word evolution. So I'll give you just a quick example how it works. Is that somebody will say, "Well, give me some evidence for evolution," and then the person might respond, "Well, here's some evidence for evolution," and they might give nylonase or some other example, and then the person will, in a Ray Comfort style, say, "Yeah, but there's still bacteria." And what I'm saying is that when you're asking for evidence of evolution, what you're really seeking is the thing that you don't believe in, and that is common ancestry, right? What I think you're asking is, why would I believe that man? Okay, here we go again. Why would I believe that man and chimpanzees, for example, have a common ancestor? That's really the difference between your view and my view, right? In terms of there being changes.
Well, I didn't say what my view was.
Well, then say what your view is. How are you approaching this conversation? I know.
Well, I'm not giving my view. I'm asking you to convince me. So I'm not giving my view. I'm asking for you to prove it.
Okay. So I'm wondering then, did you guys just have a meeting before the show and say, let's just be as obstinate as possible? Or because, as I say, sometimes I come in here and we have really good conversations where it's like, I want to know what you think, you want to know what I think. What I think you're asking me is what's my justification for believing as I do that in common ancestry, that man and, for example, chimpanzees have a common ancestor. And I can explain that, but what it sounds like you're saying now is that you're just going to sit on your hands and say, well, I'm not making any claims, I'm not whatever. I think what you're doing is you're trying to emulate what the annoying atheists do. So, if you try to convince me that Christianity is true, I'm going
Okay, if he's going to come in here and insult other atheists, I don't have the time for him today. I'm sorry. Hogtie, I told you you're probably not the guy to come in here tonight and make this. He isn't. He isn't. So I'm not going to let him come in here and badmouth atheists because they make certain arguments. I think some of the tactics that atheists use are genius, and there's no way around them. There's no way to because of the tactics that they employ to make any headway with them. So hopefully there'll be some people come in here and present some good evidence.
Well, so someone is trying to, I think, say that the evidence for evolution is the discovery of DNA after the theory of evolution was proposed. So DNA proves evolution.
Do they want to be added to the broadcast?
Well, we'll wait and see.
Do we have room? Maybe we need some of our regular followers to drop out and come back a little bit later.
Actually, we don't have too many regular followers in here. The only one that is just dropped out.
Narcos? Does Narcos want to be
to
the
Narcolepsy? You got to get the full name.
Well, let me see here. Show in broadcast.
I mean, yeah, this is the thing. We as we saw already, people come in and give a scientific definition, and then someone else just denies that that's scientific. How could we know what evolution is if they can't even agree on what the definition is? And one's saying this is the scientific definition, and in comes another person that says no, that's just not right.
So how?
Well, not to interrupt you, but it seems to be. Wait, am I echoing? Okay. It seems to be that the controversy over the definition, and it's. I think the two people previously were trying to point out that it was rather about. You're talking about change in genetic frequency, like people's skin colors, like a different genetic outputs. If you understand, things that even creationists would affirm would be things like that. Things do change over time. It's undeniable, but it's the type of change that you're talking about. So when we're using the term evolution, it's misleading, and it seems like past two conversations.
Vince, I don't know what, Vincent, I'm not sure what you're using, but you're cutting in and out. It's not like it's buffering or anything.
I muted him.
Yeah, it's hard to hear what you're saying, but again, I mean, it almost sounded like he was giving a third definition. I mean, so I guess the theory, Tim, would be that evolution can't be true because they can't even figure out what evolution is.
Well, if they can't figure out, agree with where the truth is and how to access it, how can they make any arguments and say that, what proof do they have that the other person is wrong? It's all subjective, and it's all just they're just making claims that aren't supported in any way.
Is this better? No, is this better?
A little bit. At least there's not as much echo.
All right. What I was trying to get at was the point of the definition. They are defining it as simply as a change in genetic frequency, which even creationists would affirm. Like after the flood, you had what? Probably just 2 dogs. So you need them to produce children, but you have to have them produce varieties of different children. Where that, even as a creationist myself, I affirm that. To where you're trying to get microbes, you're talking about give us evidence for microbes to man evolution. And you've been talking past each other on that point.
Hold on one second. You said you're a creationist?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're trying to do tonight is we're trying to get people that believe in evolution to convince us, to give us solid evidence that evolution is true. That's what we're trying to do. So I want you to hold on, Vince, because I do want to see if maybe Necro, has woken up and could speak. I mean, I see him or her typing in chat. We want to be convinced.
I think am I audible?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've never done a Hangout before. This is exciting.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
You look like a little blue dot with a detached
head
cylinder. Yeah, detached head. Just
that my brain is in my mouth.
I can't even know if you exist because I can't see you.
That's correct. You can't know that. You just have to accept the evidence that you observe.
How do I know I'm not delusional?
I don't. Yeah. How do I know I'm actually observing it?
I don't even know if he exists.
Well, then you'd have to ask yourself what you mean by. You have to ask yourself what you mean when you say that you know something.
What do you mean when you say you know something?
Well, I mean that I've observed it and I've been able to make a conclusion about what I've observed. But
okay, so you're saying that only things we observe can we know?
Only things that we observe can we be aware of. So yeah, that would be. I think knowledge is a sort of a subset of all things that we can that we have directly experienced.
So George Washington never lived.
And evolution isn't true.
Yeah.
Well, you can't. If you reject the idea that you have knowledge, then you can't say one way or the other whether George Washington existed.
Well, I'm not saying that we have knowledge. I'm not saying that we don't have knowledge.
But you just made the assertion based on the fact that we can't have knowledge about things we don't observe. you made the assumption, or you made the statement that George Washington didn't exist. Well, you can't make the assumption either way. You just have to say, well, I'm aware of a person by the name of George Washington, and therefore you can't make any sort of claims about it.
So are you here to make an argument?
Well, I honestly I jumped in sort of late. Yeah, I'm not going to make an argument per se because I think the arguments are well established, and the two sides are very, very concrete on their assumptions and conclusions. But what I wanted to address is the why it is that evolution is considered to be a big deal. If you put yourself in Darwin's time, what did we have? We have what we see, basically, grossly, right? We don't have electron scanning microscopes. We don't have the technology to splice DNA. We can't get down to the cellular level. All you can do is observe your surroundings. You see brown people, and you say, are they less than us? Well, we look at the tribes, like in Darwin's time. They looked at those tribes.
Wait. Why would you think that they're less? Why would someone that's brown automatically be less than someone that's not brown? Why
I'm telling you what they thought at the time. They brought them in as science exhibits to observe the savages. That's what they were doing at that time. So understand how they were thinking during Darwin's time, and you'll understand why it's a big deal. He understood that he was able to understand why it is that there is variation among the species without the benefit of knowing what DNA was. He didn't know that DNA existed. It's an amazing.
Well, he didn't, but others did at the time. But that's.
No, they didn't. DNA was unknown at that time.
Actually, better not make that assumption too quick.
No, how do you know what Darwin wrote? How do you know he wrote it? Are you taking that?
Do you accept the concept of historical science, like Ken Ham has proposed?
I'm not making any claim here at all. But you're making a claim that Darwin wrote something. Are you sure he wrote it? Could have somebody else written it?
I think that there's enough evidence to support such a conclusion.
No, there's plenty of people that write things under other people's names.
Yeah, but there's no evidence to suggest that I can make that.
Could there be another? I believe there could be another explanation. There could be.
You'd have to present the evidence, and it would have to be overwhelming relative to the evidence to the contrary.
You're saying he wrote it, and
I'm saying that I have no evidence to suggest otherwise.
I don't have to show you any evidence, but there could be another option.
Well, why would you make the conclusion or make the assumption that he didn't?
Because it's not convincing to me.
But you're making a claim without evidence at all.
I'm making no claim.
Yeah, we're not making the claim. We asked you to you made the claim. We just asked you to support it. That's all.
Oh, sure. Okay. So back to my explanation. At the time, all you had was what you were looking at, right? Based on our knowledge of history. Okay. Based on our knowledge of history. And so when Darwin was making his study
hold on.
of
history's been we know that history's been, people try to rewrite history, and it's been, throughout time we've seen times where people take historical events and just write down things that are not what actually happened. So how you're saying historically, how do we know?
Well, okay.
I mean, did you directly, as you said, observe it?
The concept of proof is strictly a mathematical one. You can't use it. When you ask for proof of evolution, it's really a malformed question or a malformed demand. You can't prove anything outside of mathematics. Everything else is a predominance of the evidence, and you make a conclusion and you live and you act on those conclusions. It's not a matter of proof, it's a matter of good conclusions. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that you can't prove evolution?
No, I'm saying that the concept of proof is strictly a mathematical concept.
Andrew, I was muted. I was trying to engage with him. Let me ask him. Are you saying that necessarily speaking, evolution has not been proven?
No, I'm saying that you can't ask for proof. You can only ask for evidence which supports it to the point where you can accept it as a fact.
A fact would be proof. So has it been proven?
No, a fact is not proof. A fact is an observable, or a fact is something that anyone, any standard person can observe and make the same conclusion about it.
Is it your position that evolution is a proven fact?
Yeah. Say a fact is it's sort of like a data point. Evolution is an explanation. It's not a fact. It's not a thing. It's an explanation.
Okay, good. Well, the first guy, Gary, said no ifs, ands, or buts. Evolution is a proven fact. And now we have this guy coming in here, totally disagreeing with him and saying no, it isn't. Gary was wrong. Well, maybe Gary was right.
That's a no true Scotsman fallacy there.
Inconsistency. We see it over and over again. And this guy's not giving us any evidence. He's just telling us what somebody wrote in a book. How do we know who wrote that? All I want is some evidence. One little bit of evidence why I should believe that evolution is true. And we get nothing, Andrew.
Well, no. We had one person that gave a scientific definition, another person who said that was wrong, and now we have someone who's saying that we can't prove it. That's proof is a mathematical thing. So essentially, what I think we're getting is that you can't prove evolution is true. One reason, because no one can even come up with a definition of what true evolution is.
All right, one more person. Is Brody? Brody, want to try to give us some evidence? Because we do have a special guest coming in here. Brody, are you pro or con evolution?
You got to add him to the broadcast first.
He is pro, so let's add him. I think.
Right, I added him.
Butch, that's his name.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you guys doing?
Unfortunately,
Can you hear me?
Necro had left. I hope he's still listening on Mixler.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you, Butch.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I've been. First, I want to say, you guys have a great show. This is a really good show, and I appreciate having the forum to be able to talk and discuss.
I muted him. He has no evidence that is true. He's making a claim about this show. He has
that clearly is not true. It's clearly true.
Obviously, it's not true.
You're crazy. You guys are hilarious. And listen, but one thing though, I wanted to ask. I've watched the show for a long time, and you guys have agreed that microevolution is real, correct? Microevolution is a thing, no?
Can you speak up a little bit?
Said you guys both agree that microevolution is true, right? Microevolution?
No, I didn't claim anything.
It all depends on what you mean by micro.
I'm talking about like the fruit fly experiment when you've seen change over time in fruit flies. They've gone into the laboratory, they've done experiments. The fruit flies after 10 years have changed into different species. That type of at the micro level, changes happen within species to adapt to its environment. We all are in agreement with that, right?
I think that's a mystery.
So you don't believe any animal adapts over time?
Butch, we want you to convince us. Give us the evidence.
I know, but I'm just trying to find out where the baseline is, where we can all agree, because
why do we have to agree?
Well, even like say what's his name, Kent Hovind agrees that microevolution, and he's one of the staunchest. Ken Ham, he agrees. So I'm just trying to find out where we are, in proof. If we believe in microevolution and not macroevolution, then we can have a discussion about macroevolution. If you don't believe either, then
I'm not Ken Ham. Are you Tim? Are you Ken Hovind?
I'm not, but he's here next to me.
So what is it? I'm asking you for Butch. What is it you believe? Give me the evidence for why, why I should believe in evolution.
Well, I think you have to believe in the science and what the science has shown. I believe that if you take all the science together, then you have a logical conclusion that evolution is true. And I don't agree with this. I have to actually be there to do the scientific test. Because, for instance, I do believe in the Bible and I do believe in Jesus, but I wasn't there to see him be resurrected. But I have the belief in that. So because I believe the testimony in the Bible. So I do think that when we're talking about this, we have to be rational when we talk about what we can and cannot believe and what we expect the proof to be now. What can I show you now? I can't show you evolution is true on this computer, but I can tell you what I've observed and what I've read to make an argument for it. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, but
wait. He's asking us what kind of evidence are we looking for to be convinced.
Well, but
Andrew, I just need to say this: that I don't know what kind of evidence would convince me. But you, who believe evolution, you should know. So.
Well, I wouldn't know. I don't know what evidence would convince you, but I'll tell you what convinced me. What convinced me was, let's say, the silver fox experiment, in which, in Siberia. A couple of things that convinced me was just the fossil record. You can see the changes happen over time.
You just made an assertion of silver. You just made an assertion of silver fox. What is silver fox? What are you talking about?
In Russia, back in I think the late 70s, early 80s, there was an experiment done where they were taking foxes in Siberia, and what they were doing was they would shave them for their coats and make jackets and things of that nature. So what happens is that their foxes were very rabid, so they were hard to handle and it was hard to breed in these experiments. So what they did was they said, okay, what we're going to do is breed these foxes for tameness. So they would just use the foxes that were tame and allow them to breed. What happened is over about 10 years, those foxes actually began to bark, have dog-like qualities, floppy ears, and you were able to see the transition from what we believe is from fox to dog, and you were able to see these changes, evolutionary changes, within a small amount of generations. So these are the type of experiments that show that change does happen within populations when you do have outside factors of selection.
So did the DNA of the fox change?
Well, the DNA, I believe, no. Well, the DNA changed, but also the outward appearance did change too.
So the foxes now barked like a dog.
Well, they not only did bark, they also had floppy ears. They also were tame. They also, when you called them by their name, so you did see physical changes to these animals over time that make them more dog-like. But again, they were still foxes, but they were different than the foxes from before. And I agree.
Still foxes.
Yeah, no, I agree, 110%. They were.
And that's your proof. That's your proof.
Well, my proof is that things happen at the micro level, not at the macro level. Mm-hmm.
You know, you asked what kind of proof we'd want, but Necro said that's a mathematical thing, so you can't prove it. So really, in all honesty, if it can't be proven, then isn't it just a fairy tale? It's just something we tell children to make them feel better at night, so that they don't have to think that they're going to have to face a God and feel judged.
Well, again, just like Tim said, he's not with Ken Hogan, so I'm not necromonger. I don't, maybe that might be his argument, but I believe honestly,
necrolepsy.
Necrolepsy or whatever his name is. But listen, but I honestly don't think that there's this competition between believing in evolution and believing in God. And maybe that may be part of the philosophy that you guys hear too. But I think you can believe in the science and believe in an all-powerful God, and you can believe in Jesus like I do. So I don't think there's this big separation too.
So, Tim, you're muted. I see your lips moving, but we can't hear you.
They can hear. I think they can hear me on Mixer when I do that. But, so yeah.
Well, we would like to hear you too.
I don't think that guy Butch is even a. He's just making an argument from micro, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he was. He's not giving an argument for evolution.
No. So here's we're going to let the cat out of the bag now, which what I've done here for the first, I don't know, what have you been doing? 45 minutes?
About that.
50 minutes? Been proving how How good of an argument is the Dillahunty Dodge? How good of an argument is the Dillahunty Dodge? Well, it's not an argument. It's just a refusal of all claims. And that's what I have employed here for 50 minutes. I don't know. I make no claims. That's not convincing. How do you know? And guys, that's the only argument that Matt Dillahunty has. This is, and Hogtie, he caught on. He knew what was happening. He had an idea what was happening. And then he insulted anyone who would use that argument. So basically, Hogtie is insulting Matt Dillahunty, which may be his position. He may totally disagree with the way Matt Dillahunty, defends his atheism or rejects Christianity. I don't know what his position is, but as soon as you say the two of you can't agree on your source material, Hogtie's like, that's a horrible argument. That would be a horrible argument against Christianity. That's horrible. You're right, Hogtie. You're right. And it's not us who's making the argument.
No, and it was good to see some things in doing this. Hogtie actually was really good because he nailed it. When people sit there and to just say, well, since you can't agree on definitions, therefore, and he said, then Christianity is just wrong. And I think then he caught on to what we were doing, and then I think when you said, hey, tonight's not the night, and I think Necrolepsy, I'm glad that he didn't leave because we're doing stuff with him too, just employing the same tactics that are used against Christians all the time. And what I hope is that some of those that use this type of tactic, that you saw how frustrating it is to try to have an honest conversation. And I do want to apologize to Hogtie. I think he did pick up on it. Necro as well. We're trying to display something. We come on here week after week and try to have honest conversations. Not people that are, I think it was during Hogtie or whoever was popping in and just making obscene things and dropping off. The reality is that it is frustrating to have an honest conversation with someone that has no intention of having an honest conversation. And I think Necro would probably agree that he was frustrated, and so would Hogtie, and so would Gary.
And the viewers. The viewers are hating on me right now. The non-believers, they're hating on me because that was totally frustrating. Something that you believe to be true, and I would not allow any of your points to make any headway at all because I just reject everything that you say. And let me tell people who are listening, Christians, in order to use a Dillahunty Dodge, you don't have to know anything about anything. You don't have to have any knowledge about what's being talked about. You just question every claim and question every source and reject all attempts to give you an argument. Just nope. I just wrote it down. I wrote down everything Matt Dillahunty, all his Dodge, wrote it down and used every single one of them. You want to watch the video that I made showing Matt Dillahunty dodging Matt Slick? Go do that. But it's actually going to get this hangout's going to get even better now because we have a special guest, somebody who was supposed to come on. I don't know what was it, a couple months ago, Paul Taylor, but things didn't work out. We were going to review a Bill Nye video. And that was going to be fun. We were both looking forward to it. But welcome, everybody, to the broadcast. Paul Taylor. How are you, sir?
Well, good. I'm having a few technical difficulties here. I'm catching every other word that you're saying at the moment, but I'm glad to be with you.
Ooh, might need a reboot.
Maybe just turn your camera off completely, and we'll see your Google profile. That'll save some of your computer process and your bandwidth. Maybe do that. Do you know how to turn?
Oh, that's scary. He just went to his profile and I saw his face. It was better when it was all black.
Andrew, please don't insult her. How about try it now, Paul?
Okay, I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right. Well, welcome to the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, Google Hangout.
Well, it's good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
So we hope to get some people to come back in who might want to talk to Paul Taylor. Paul Taylor, let me ask you the question: is evolution true or false? And we're not talking about micro. We're talking about.
Well, hold on. Why don't we first could we let Paul introduce himself to? I think Paul is new to many of your listeners, and probably don't know who he is. And
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So,
my apology.
Well, my name's Paul Taylor. I speak with a funny voice, though not quite as funny as Andrew Rappaport. But I am a speaker on creation and apologetics, and I travel all around the States speaking on that subject. I'm the director of the Mount St. Helens Creation Center based in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest. Like an introduction, I've written a few books, I've done a few videos, and that's who I am.
so do you?
So you ask questions?
Yeah. So,
You might
so
remember.
what's your view? Do you believe evolution is true? I don't hear you. Hope we didn't lose him. Paul, are you there?
I'm sorry, everything seems to have gone silent. So carry on and as we go along.
So, Paul, if you have some other things running on your computer, maybe that you could shut those down. Maybe that'll save the bandwidth. If not, we might have to try a reboot or something. Or you can always try from like a tablet or something like that. That always works.
They always work.
Well, okay, it didn't work so well last time with Jason.
Yeah. I'm probably safer sticking with.
Okay, so Paul, first
sticking
off,
with the laptop.
you're from a place, England, right? What language do they speak there?
I understand they speak English in England, which is why it's called English.
and for the record, you were actually asked that question once, weren't you?
No, my son Adam was asked that question. He was at a Bible camp. He was helping lead a Bible camp in Oklahoma, and one young lady on the camp said, "So tell me, what language do they speak in England?" So he said, "Well, English, of course." So she said, "That's awesome. Say something to me in English then."
So Americans aren't always the smartest in the world. So now you actually, with your accent, you pronounce the word evolution correctly. So could you pronounce it and then say whether you believe it or not, whether it's right or wrong, and where you see problems with it or support for it?
I suppose in England we would pronounce the word evolution.
So it's evolution. It's evil. I think that's right.
Yes. You're asking, do I believe in Darwinian evolution? The idea that molecules, inorganic molecules, could get themselves together, form single cells. Those single cells could reproduce over a long period of time, over millions and millions of years, and eventually produce something as highly evolved as Andrew. And
well, don't go too far.
The answer to that is no. That cannot happen. It does not happen, and it does not comport with what the Bible says is actually what happened. Of course, the main thing to remember there is that when you're trying to carry out a scientific investigation of any sort, if you're not there to carry out that investigation, it's normal to accept the best eyewitness account. And the best eyewitness account we have of how the universe came into being is that we have recorded in the early chapters of Genesis.
You mean there was someone that actually observed the creation of the universe and then wrote it down?
That's right, sir.
Isn't that the scientific method?
Well, it isn't possible to do a scientific methodology on something that has happened as a one-off event in the past. Scientific experiments are things that are done in the present, that you take observations in the present. and it isn't possible to reproduce something that happened as a one-off event in the past. So those things are not capable of scientific verification.
Okay, now you didn't seem to give a lot of wiggle room in your belief that evolution can't be possible. And yet we had people that actually believe that it's absolute. Okay, some were being, some just said absolutely it's a proven fact, and gave a scientific definition that others disagreed with. But I think, in all honesty, we all agree that there is changes that occur within animals, humans. There's differences. There's changes, right?
Well, I guess what you're trying to do is define your terms, and that's quite important. It's very important when you're actually having any conversation like this that you define your terms. And of course, if you look up the word evolution in a dictionary, you'll find that it refers to changes. After all, the ministry that I lead, you could say that that ministry has evolved over a period of time. That would be a perfectly correct thing to say. Because in that broad sense, linguistically, the word evolution means change. But when we're talking about Darwinian evolution, we're not talking about any type of change. We're not talking about, say, the type of change where one animal can select within its existing gene pool so that there is a variation within that kind. For example, you get variations within the dog kind. We're fairly certain that animals within the dog kind probably must have developed from animals which are either wolves or something similar to wolves. There has been a development and sort of branching out from that point. That is not evolution in the Darwinian sense, however, because it does not involve the spontaneous generation of new genetic information. It's simply selection of an existing gene pool of information. So that is not evolution in the Darwinian sense. Some people used to like to refer to that as microevolution, but these days we don't tend to use that term. We tend to refer to it as speciation because it's not evolution in the Darwinian sense. In the Darwinian sense, to achieve that sort of evolution requires brand new genetic information to be spontaneously created. That, of course, can't happen scientifically because it would disobey the first law of information science, which says that information cannot arise by itself from material. So it's theoretically it doesn't happen. Observationally, you do not observe it to happen. And for those Christians who want to look at that, it is not something that is actually mentioned in the Bible. And as people have pointed out, there was sufficient language around when the Hebrew Bible was written for them to have described a process of evolution in some way, if that is actually what had happened. But it isn't what had happened. God created animals according to their kind, to breed according to their kind. So it's perfectly possible for there to have been that variation within kinds. It isn't possible for new kinds to have developed or for a creature to have crossed over from one kind to another.
So with that, I mean, we had someone that was really arguing that DNA proves evolution is true, and it sounds like you're saying the exact opposite. It sounds like you're saying that evolution is disproved by DNA.
DNA is a form of information, so I'm saying that it is simply not consistent with the idea of Darwinian evolution because you cannot create that brand new information from nowhere. So yes, as you analyze more and more about DNA, as people learn more and more about DNA, it becomes more and more realized that that sort of Darwinian evolution is simply not possible.
Okay, so Butch is saying DNA does prove evolution is true 100%.
DNA does not prove evolution at all, and in fact, it's perfectly clear that the information science can be applied to DNA, and that it obeys the laws of information science. So by that analogy, you can see that it simply isn't possible.
Okay, so DNA is it's a language, right? It has components to it that make us who we are, and it's in every living thing. How would, if evolution is true, because you're saying we have someone saying it's true, you're saying that it doesn't prove that that evolution is true, but what you were saying was that we would have to have new DNA, some new information entered into DNA. I mean, first off, is that possible? Can we get new information in DNA?
Well, the DNA molecule is a medium through which information can be carried. Okay, so information is not an integral part of the medium that carries it. So that, for example, you can have music in information form saved in a CD or in an MP3 file on a computer, or when I was young, we used to have these large black round objects with grooves on them that held the musical information. The music would still be the same, it's just held in different types of information, different media. So DNA does not consist of the information. The DNA is a molecule. The arrangement of the 4 letters, if you like, that's within the DNA, that's where the information actually is. And information science, as I said, says that information does not arise spontaneously by chance. It just does not, meaningful information does not arise. You see, if you look at how DNA is made up, DNA is a double helical structure, so you've got these 2 copies of the information, and as you produce a new molecule, one of them is unwrapping and is forming elsewhere, and in order to take that information, it's got to be read, and it's got to be read by systems such as RNA molecules that themselves have to be created from the DNA. I remember back in 1991, Professor Richard Dawkins, or plain Dr. Richard Dawkins as he was in those days, did a series of children's lectures on the BBC back in England, and he was trying to illustrate that information comes about from nowhere. So he got a bag of Scrabble letters, okay? Just to explain for Andrew's sake, Scrabble is a game that involves words, you know, and letters in place. And so he had this bag of Scrabble letters, and he got the children to pick letters one after the other. And so they were all picking letters, and they were doing what letters they got, until 3 children on the run got the letters C-A-T. So he stopped them at that point. He said, there, you've got information. C-A-T spells cat, so you can get random information from a Scrabble bag in that way. But of course that doesn't make any sense, because that only made sense because he was in an English-speaking country. If he tried that in Wales, C-A-T does not mean cat. In fact, it doesn't actually, it's not a word at all. It's just a random set of letters as far as the Welsh language is concerned. And if you used a language that didn't use the Latin alphabet at all, say if you try Latin Greek, then it would be even less meaningful. So the information requires the language in order to read it. And it's the same with DNA. The information that's there requires the language in order to read it. But the language in order to read it is only created by the DNA in the first place. So you've got a circular problem there.
Okay, so the DNA, right, would need to get new information. We do have that, though, happen, right? We do have DNA that gets altered and changed. But I think the key word that I heard you say was meaningful, right? So the issue that many would argue is that DNA, we see changes, we do see new information added. Cancer would be a new information that's added to the DNA, but it's not in a positive way, right?
Well, things of that sort could be degradations of information. In any case, certain types of diseases would be degradations of information rather than new information. But just putting in new letters does not itself constitute information any more than just randomly adding Scrabble letters to the Scrabble board constitutes actual words. Information is what is understandable, and it requires an intelligence in order to understand it. And this is one of the problems with trying to understand how DNA works. DNA is a lot more complex than people think, you see. because people just assume, well, it must be like sort of an encyclopedia, and they're always standing in awe of the amount of information that's in DNA, saying, well, you know, you could make a set of encyclopedias that go up to the moon and back, but it's actually more complicated than you think. Supposing you were a technical author and you were asked to write a manual for some strange, obscure piece of technology, let's say an iPhone, for example, because that's strange and obscure. So let's say that you were asked to write a manual for that, and your boss has told you to write that manual. It's just one chapter to explain how to switch the thing on, and then as he goes out of the room, he says, "Oh, by the way, there's an app on the iPhone which is used for, let's say, performing scientific calculations. I need a manual that will explain how that app works. So what I want you to do is the chapter that you write, when you read it forwards from left to right, it will be the manual on how to switch on the iPhone. But when you read all the words backwards, the very same chapter, but read it backwards, then it actually explains how this particular scientific calculator app works." Now, you would say that's completely impossible. We're always fascinated by palindromes, which is what I'm talking about, really, and you can't get palindromes very long, you know, where a sentence reads the same forwards and backwards, or maybe has different information forwards and backwards. For example, you say you have the word stressed. You sort of, if you try and picture that word spelled out, of course you can remove that stress by turning the word backwards, because then it spells desserts. And I always find that desserts helps remove stress, the feeling of being stressed. So it's got the same letters in, forwards and backwards, different information. So how could you write a chapter, a whole long chapter that gives you one lot of information when you read it forwards and another lot of information when you read it backwards? You would not be able to write such a manual. However, DNA has lots of examples of precisely that.
So, okay, so when we have that, though, right, we have the DNA, you know, I guess the real struggle that I have with it is the fact that people argue that it just should have, just mathematically, the probability we can add information. Like it would just get in there through changes over time, and I think that's the reason why they always have to keep extending the amount of time. Because the more we discover, actually, like we've discovered or completed the human genome supposedly until about, I think it's about 9 months to a year ago, that they found there may be a second layer of DNA that has its own set of coding. That's a whole new complexity that they didn't even know. So now we haven't completed the genome.
Well, that's the point that I'm making, because there is information going forwards and backwards. There's information that crosses. There's information in lots of different directions. The whole amount of information is a lot more complex than people think. As I said, it would be awe-inspiring enough if it was simply something that you read from one end to the other, like a huge, long encyclopedia. But it's actually far more sophisticated than that. And it doesn't happen by chance. Mathematically, the chances of that sort of thing happening is far greater than the number of atoms in the universe. These sort of things do not happen by chance. But that's an interesting point, because a friend of mine, Mike Riddle, talks about magic words, where he points out that many evolutionists seem to believe that so long as you throw the words millions of years in, or billions of years, then whatever is impossible becomes possible. The idea that the concept of millions of years is a magic word that enables anything to happen. Well, it's simply not true. If it's not possible, it doesn't matter how many millions of years you give it, it's not possible.
That is the magic. That is the magic of the atheist claim. I've heard it many times. You might as well just put that word in there. Magic, millions of years. See, it can happen. Billions of years.
Well, I think that's the reason why. I mean, I jokingly had said, you know, when the Creation Museum was being formed and they had the age of that secularists say for the universe, I said that should really be a digital clock that just keeps rolling up in numbers, because when I was a kid and that was shortly after Noah's time, Paul, because I know he's going to make that crack. But when I was a kid, the universe was only 420 million years old. By the time I was through college, it was 1 billion years old. Just about a dozen years ago, it was 2 billion or 2.5 billion, and now I think it's 4 or 5 billion years old. It keeps increasing. And I kind of think that they just kind of go, oh, numbers don't work. We need to add more math to it. More magic numbers.
More magic. So we've got open spots here. We want to get somebody in here who disagrees with Paul Taylor. And
well, we do have some.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're reading in the chat,
we've got room to. I'm not reading that chat.
Okay, so I mean, it'd be interesting. We have both Butch, who was on earlier, Butch and Narcolepsy, are both in the chat saying that there's this disagreement with Paul. So maybe it would be good, Butch, if he'd like to make his case. Let's see if the belief that changes and errors in DNA can prove evolution. And I think, Butch, you can correct me. You claim you profess to be a Christian. Is that correct? And there's silence.
I unmuted him.
But you could talk.
Oh, his volume is all the way down. Sorry.
Hear me?
Sorry, Butch. You're good now.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so do you profess to be a Christian, if I understand correctly?
Yes.
Okay, but you believe in evolution?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So you're arguing, and Paul, Butch was the one that was saying that DNA 100% proves evolution. So make your case to Paul. Let's see how that goes.
Well, I don't think there's anything I'm probably going to be able to say that's going to be able to convince, Paul or either you guys from your position. But DNA proves evolution because, for instance, you can see the convergence when they've mapped the genome, and you can see the convergence between the relatedness between all animals. You can see how things have evolved. You can track things back to see when species are split off. DNA 100% follows evolution. I'm not understanding this information argument. Maybe Paul can explain to me a little bit more what he means, because, for instance, DNA, when what I mean by viral infections, sometimes when organisms are affected by viruses, sometimes that DNA can extend the DNA that's already there, and subsequent mutations can lead to different changes. And even in particular copying errors, when new organisms are born, that sometimes the DNA is actually duplicated in certain areas, and then those changes happen when they are mutated. So the DNA structure can expand from what we've seen in the laboratory and in the fossil record. I'm just not understanding this information problem that Paul is talking about. Hello?
Paul, are you there? Paul's muted. There we go. Paul says, I've completely lost sound. Sorry. I think Paul may need a reboot. So, well, that was not so well. We were hoping to get Paul to respond, and so that's a perfect proof why evolution can't be true, because technology doesn't work. Evolution, what Paul dropped out. He's going to try and jump in. No one else jump in for a couple of minutes so we can get Paul back in. But I would argue that a case. I mean, think about it. Would chaos and random chance produce what they should produce is randomness, not order. And so if you think about the fact, and this is one of the questions I was going to bring up with Paul, but Butch, think about this.
All right.
That when we talk about DNA, and DNA was known at the time of Darwin. Darwin did not know it, but it was known. Okay, it was in scientific journals at the time, before the time of Darwin's writing of Origin of the Species. Keeping in mind they didn't have the internet. I know it's strange people don't understand what time was like before that with information traveling at the speed of the internet. So it didn't, all the things that were known and written about didn't always get passed around. We have no evidence that Darwin knew anything about DNA. But
No, I don't believe he did that. But Darwin just proposed the mechanism by which species did change. He didn't understand how it happened, but he understood what happened. He was saying that because of natural selection, this was the mechanism by which evolution. Darwin didn't discover evolution. Evolution had been an idea that was proposed.
Oh yeah,
by the Greeks
Darwin's
before.
grandfather proposed it. I mean, that's where Darwin got it from.
No, it was actually proposed. There were different versions of evolution. There was Martian evolution. There were a whole bunch of different versions.
Yeah, no,
Darwin
I'm saying it's not. People think it was new with Darwin, and it wasn't.
No, it wasn't at all. He
was,
just proposed the mechanism. He's gotten credit for the whole theory now, but he just proposed the mechanism by which evolution works.
I mean, some try. I don't think there's good evidence for this, but some try to argue that Aristotle, believed in evolution and put it forth. I've read some of the things, and I didn't seem like, I think there was a stretch, but it is clear that Darwin's grandfather, who would still I guess be Darwin, so Charles Darwin's grandfather, he had been writing on it, so it wasn't anything new. Darwin had written some, but Darwin even said there was a way to prove whether his theories were true, and those things have not come to pass. One of the things is fossil evidence. When you look at things like the Cambrian explosion, it has to assume that all of a sudden we have fossils, a huge number of fossils all in one layer. It magically just all the fossils appeared. I would argue that's more evidence for a worldwide flood, because that's what we would expect to see in a flood. I do, but a side note before you respond to that, note for Tim, the room's full. It might be hard for Paul to get back in.
You know what? I actually have to put my daughter to bed, so I'll jump out so Paul can come back in, and you can have somebody else jump in.
Okay. All right, Butch. Well, thanks for coming in. And what might be good until Paul jumps back in is, we were kind of employing the Dillahunty Dodge with necrolepsy earlier, and it's his first hangout, so it's kind of feel bad about that. His first hangout, and we're playing the atheist troll role.
Andrew, as we wait for Paul to come back, and let me encourage the Christians who are here that are always here to drop out, maybe come back later to make sure that there's room. Andrew, maybe it would be good for you to take a moment and explain why Darwinian evolution causes to believe in that, and to also claim to be a Christian. Why that's a problem, in not other than in Genesis, okay, the account, but in regards to other things that are huge issues in regards to the Adam and Eve and.
Well, yeah, even before that, really to believe in what's called theistic evolution, that's the title for it. It is the idea that God actually employed evolution in the process of creation. And so this became popular really with the Scopes monkey trial, which for folks that may not be aware what happened there, there was a teacher who wanted to teach evolution in school. The suit came out that it was going to be that we should teach both evolution and creation. That was the result, and the argument, that was made. Well, I don't want to get into all that, but basically, what happened was the lawyer making the case against evolution actually got put on the stand, and when he was challenged, they asked him, what he believed personally, and he said maybe God used evolution. And the issue there is that's what really started
what's known as theistic evolution. Here's the problem with it, Tim. The problem with it is, if you're going to say you hold to the Bible as an authority, and you're going to hold to the Bible as infallible, and then you're going to hold to the theory of evolution, here's some dilemmas that you have. One, when you start to accept those things, especially if you're going to accept, let's back up and say, if you accept things like evolution, millions of years, and the whole process of creation in a Big Bang cosmology, well, there is no way to line that up with the Bible and say they're the same thing. The reason is because the days of creation don't line up with Big Bang cosmology. For example, in the Bible, we don't have stars until day 4. Big Bang cosmology, we have it day 1. I mean, that's the first thing. We have an explosion from nothing. It explodes and becomes everything. So right off the bat, Big Bang cosmology has issues. You can't line it up with the Bible. Okay? You then are going to have other problems, because what are you then doing? You're then accepting the scientific theories for, to them are now going to be what's authoritative, and you're not accepting the Bible. And when you accept evolution, you're going to have that. You have a problem with Adam and Eve, as you brought up. The issue that, well, you may or may not have an issue with Adam and Eve, because what many, and Tim, you may not have had to deal with this too much, but a lot of people that believe in evolution haven't really thought through what happened with the first man and first woman. There is references, and you can go search it, to mitochondria Adam and the mitochondria Eve, and I find it interesting they call them Adam and Eve. But there's the recognition that there had to be a first Adam and Eve. And the issue with evolution, first off, if evolution is true, you have to have the very first man and the very first woman, that they evolve with all the parts completely functioning, male and female, perfectly. I mean, think about how much is involved in men and women, the differences between, the first time you go from an asexual to bisexual, and they have to both happen at the same time in the same area, and know that they're the only ones that they can mate with. And that's just astronomical. But to have that is to deny what the Bible says, that how God created Adam and Eve. And once you reject that, now what are you doing? Now what becomes, how do you determine where the Bible's accurate and not accurate? See, the issue is the Bible's either going to be your authority or it's not. If the Bible's your authority, then you can't have evolution, because it doesn't match up with what we have in Genesis. So that would be the issue. And, I think Paul's back in. Paul, is your microphone working now?
Well, yes, it appears to be working.
Good, and it's much clearer. So what do you think about that? The question that was asked by Tim, and you'll probably do a better job. Can theistic evolution be true, basically? And what problems do we have if it's not?
Theistic evolution looks at Genesis and says to God, right, I've read what you said, God, now I'm going to tell you what you actually meant. It's actually an offense to God.
That's a better way of putting it. When you have a British accent, you're just automatically 10 points higher on the intelligence scale, the IQ test, right? You just sound more intelligent, at least. But that was pretty succinct. So now your connection is better. Could we try getting you on camera, or is that not working?
It's probably not a good idea, because
Okay.
I've got a Wi-Fi connection here, and it's probably not doing very well.
All right. So, and Butch had a long question for you, and then you couldn't respond. I don't know. Did you hear what he had asked? And I don't know if
I'm afraid I didn't hear any of it. It's the icon was moving in the middle of the screen. I didn't hear your lead up to his question either. That's when everything went wrong. Sorry.
Okay. So, well, let's do this. There's a fellow here earlier before you originally joined called Narcolepsy. And he was engaging earlier and what we were doing earlier, Paul, was we were actually employing the Dillahunty Dodge and showing how frustrating it is to try to have honest conversations with people when they have no intention of being honest in the conversation. But I think Necro had some questions. He's been commenting at least. And Necro, if you want to, unmute yourself and maybe ask the questions. I'm going to turn you up so that we can hear you. There we go. Go for
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, so it sounds to me like, Paul, that your main concern, barring the entire religious issue altogether, your main concern is that DNA is information. Information is a perception of something which translates meaning to the perceiver. It's like calling a car manufacturing plant like a novel or something like that. The car manufacturing plant makes cars, and if you expand that car manufacturing plant to make different cars, making the analogy to DNA, expanding the molecule to make new genes, to make new proteins, how can you argue against the concept of evolution using the angle of information to disprove it?
Well, I just did do before, if you were listening. Your example of the car manufacturing plant is not a sensible analogy, in fact, because there has to be designers in order to develop the different information required for the different cars. Those cars are designed, they don't evolve, which actually, therefore, that analogy, if you were to press it too far, is actually not good for your case anyway. However, I'm not particularly over-concerned just with information. Those are the questions on which Andrew was actually conversing before. The main point here is that there is a creator who created the universe with the maximum amount of information. And that's what we're looking at. The maximum type of information, or the maximum level of information from the 5 levels of information, would be the Bible itself, because it's an information source that's authoritative. And so everybody needs to start from some starting point. You're presumably going to be starting from a starting point that there is no God and that everything has developed randomly by itself. But as we've seen, that's actually a starting point that's self-defeating. A much better starting point is the starting point there to suggest that God exists and that the Bible is true. And we take out a cue from that and see what the corollary of that is. The corollary of that is that we can understand and explain the universe as it is.
Well, I would disagree that you have to, that anyone necessarily has to have a starting point. I mean, when we were all infants, we had absolutely nothing to start with except our direct observations. As we, interacted with our environment, we make, determinations. I mean, why do you have to have a starting point in the first place? I think that's the main problem. It's the presupposition argument. Why do you have to have presuppositions? Simply
well, your argument is fallacious, isn't it? Because no infant is going to develop these ideas by themselves.
That's my point.
Exactly. So that you're exactly making my point for me. So therefore, that's why there is an information source to begin with. Information requires an intelligence. It does not arise by itself.
That would be a case if the Bible was not developed over time by people. If the Bible, had been here ever since the first person was able to perceive the universe, you could make that case. But the Bible was not here before somebody wrote it, or before somebody orally, passed it down.
Exactly. And so my position is that the first chapter of Genesis was given by God. And therefore, these things have been known right from the beginning. Of course, there was further revelation along the way, but it's completely self-consistent. So the information starts from the beginning.
Well, that's an assumption you're making. but the oral tradition, over there in the Middle East was passed down from person to person to person. We don't actually know. We don't have anything to confirm or even really suggest outside of a presupposition that this was God.
Well, of course, that's where you're not correct, of course, because the Bible was written over 1,500 years by over 44 different authors, and you could see that it has a consistency all the way through it. The number of manuscripts contemporary manuscripts for the Bible is more than 1,000 times the total number of manuscripts of every other ancient book put together. So the amount of evidence that there is for the Bible is overwhelming. So it's simply a point of prejudice on your part to say that you think it was passed down, and the implication being that it's therefore changed over time. It's simply not true.
No. You're missing my point. It's not the fact that it was passed down. It's the fact that you're making the assumption it's from God, right?
Absolutely.
That's my point.
Absolutely. I'm saying that that's a logical starting point.
And I'm saying you don't need to have a starting point at all.
Well, you do. You have a starting point. You have a starting point that that's not the case.
No, actually, I don't. I don't make any conclusion. I think God is an open question.
No, that's not true. You're making a starting point. You have a starting point that you're not able to know that. Where does your information come from?
Well, you can't know that. You can only assume that.
Is there anything at all that you can be sure of? What do you know that you can be absolutely sure of?
Define sure. Define what you mean by absolutely sure.
What do you know, and how do you know it?
Well, what do I know? I have memories of interactions with my environment, and that's the memories is equivalent with what we mean by knowledge.
Hey, Paul, before you answer, just for those who are listening and watching, and for Tim, it did not take very long at all for the Dillahunty Dodge to be put in practice by an atheist, did it?
Oh, come on.
It's absolutely true. It happens all the time, Andrew.
Well,
it happens all the time.
I know. Well, that's Paul. Before you came in, this is exactly what Tim and I did. We spent 50 minutes just. Well, it depends on what your definition is. Well, how do you define that? Well, we can't.
Yes.
And making, just saying, well, we're not claiming anything. We're not making any claims. I mean, we just spent 45 minutes doing that to show the foolishness of it.
It is completely false that there is no claim. There is always a claim at the beginning of every information.
Well, yeah. I mean, I actually sent to Tim privately. I said, so his presupposition is that we can't have any presuppositions. I mean, I do find this funny. I do, because this was exactly what we demonstrated, and we didn't plan on although it is kind of funny that necrolepsy walked into this, but you're doing the exact thing that we spent the first hour.
Well, I would disagree. When you say presuppositions, would you say that that's the same thing as ground rules?
I don't think you actually answered the question I asked before, which was, how can you be sure about anything you know?
Right. And I asked you to define what you mean by...
Which is the Dillahunty Dodge. That's exactly the Dillahunty Dodge, which we're objecting to. So you don't actually have an answer.
Well, no.
I think that's probably the end of that conversation.
I'm trying to protect myself from the goalpost moving that might happen should I give an answer.
No
so you have
moving.
to define exactly what you mean before I give an answer, so that I'm not, sort of caught in a false dichotomy.
Yeah, I think we've just spotted the Dodge again. I don't think it's worth continuing that conversation.
I love it. Paul Taylor going all precept on us. I appreciate it, Paul. Hey, do you know how long you ignored me on the internet, Paul Taylor?
How long I ignored you on the internet?
Yes. My
I don't recall ignoring you on the internet.
My Facebook, before Facebook made me use my real name, I used.
Oh, I see. I never ever accept friend requests from anyone who doesn't use their real name, and I also don't actually accept friendship requests from anyone I don't know. If people want to sign on to my public profile page, that's fine. But my actual Facebook page is purely for me and my friends and my family. And that came about because of some unpleasant comments that some Christians actually made. Evangelical Christians are supposed to be, they just made some rude comments about a member of my family.
Wait. So you only accept friends on your Facebook?
Absolutely. Friends on Facebook are friends in real life.
But you and I are Facebook friends.
I made an exception for you, Andrew, just to prove a point.
I think you and I are too now. But you didn't accept my friendship request with Bible Thumping Wingnut, and I'm like, no, I know this guy. I'm friends with so and so, and you're like, I'm sorry, it's just a policy of mine.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
good.
I'm sorry about that, but as I said, I don't accept friendship requests from anyone who doesn't use their real name, so that's just a rule. I just have a rule, and that's something I stick to.
It's a good rule. But yeah, there's a lot of people who say all kinds of horrible things about you just because they disagree. So this is interesting that do we have any other people to engage with Paul? You would think that this is such a hot topic that people would be jumping in here left and right.
Well, while we're waiting, Tim, I mean let's deal. I mean, how perfect was that we had someone come in and employ the very thing that we were demonstrating?
Well, obviously, I wasn't there before you began that, but it's something that I'm pretty familiar with, and it's a sort of argument. I've seen it over and over again over many occasions, because the absence of presuppositions, as you quite rightly say, is itself a presupposition, and therefore it becomes a logical fallacy. To say you don't have presuppositions, that's the absence of that is a presupposition, because you've got to start with something. Now, I am perfectly honest and above board. I am biased, and everybody is actually biased. This is the point that I'm making. You can't actually argue these things in a vacuum. There is a bias. My bias is that God exists and the Bible is true. And I can show by discussion that a different case is logically fallacious, and that's the point that we're trying to make.
Paul, for those of us who engage with those who claim to professing atheists, what would you say to them? That what is their bias when they say, "Hey, I'm just not convinced that any of the God concepts are valid"? What is their bias?
The bias is that they don't accept a beginning. Their bias is that they don't accept that they have a bias. There's an inability to see that they have to start from a particular point in order to make a knowledge claim. It's this question of how do you know what you know? How can you be sure of anything that you know? Of course, an honest atheist will say that they can't actually be sure of things that they know, because there's always a possibility that what they know is fallacious. The person who was on before was talking about his senses, the knowledge he gains from his senses, but you can't actually be sure of any knowledge gained from senses. We know that senses can be manipulated and can be misunderstood. That's the whole point of the sort of puzzles that many of us like, optical illusion puzzles and things that will fool other senses of the body. You can always fool senses. So you can't rely ever on those things. That's not a firm ground on which to build any sort of knowledge. So there isn't actually a firm ground on which to build anything if you don't start from God and from the Bible being true.
And that's their position, is that they can just assume, and they can, this seems to quote unquote work, whatever working means, and they go through life making assumptions and not knowing anything to be true, but just having the best reasonable answer is that this is true, but we don't know for sure.
Well, one of the things, Tim, and because we were employing the Dillahunty Dodge, and it was great to hear Paul, who wasn't in on the first hour, recognize immediately and call it the Dillahunty Dodge. That it's actually starting to be the name for it. But you know, one of the things that I would have asked both Gary Hall, Hogtie, Necrolancy, the issue is you know, one of the things I find with these guys is they never question their own assumptions. You and I have talked about this. They're skeptical of everything but their skepticism. You know, they don't do the thing of going back and asking what it is they are trusting in. They are trusting certain information. They're not skeptical of their scientific journals or what they're being told in school and things like that. They're not skeptical of that. They're skeptical only of Christianity and what the Bible says. And that's the thing that I find interesting. And you know, it's interesting because they so often like to quote Descartes, and who, you know, the famous quote, "I think, therefore I am," and so few people have actually studied what he was trying to do. What he was trying to be the ultimate skeptic. He wanted to question everything and say, where, you know, if we keep questioning and being skeptical, eventually we're going to get back to the answer for everything. It's going to, you know, when you keep asking questions, you're going to get back to what really is the beginning. And what ends up happening? Well, what ends up happening is he said he can't go further than "I think, therefore I am," and he actually proved in his thinking that that's proved God. The fact that he can think, which is what we always argue with the precept when we argue precept. The fact that someone's making an argument you can't do without God. You don't have the ability to think. The fact that you exist. Existence is something that we can have because God. And that's what the skepticism led him to. And it's so interesting because the skeptics today don't want to challenge their own assumptions, and they have them, as Paul said, but they don't want to challenge them. They want to believe them with a blind religious faith.
One of the things that's in addition to that is that Christians these days seem to be very embarrassed about their own assumptions and seem to prefer not to use them. Many Christians will assume that there is a neutral ground on which that they can argue. But actually, our presupposition is that there is no neutral ground. So as one who's actually saying, well, maybe it's neutral ground we can argue on, you've actually conceded the point that is being made. Now, I'm not the sort of person who thinks very fast on their feet, which is why I tend to leave the process of debating to other people, certain other people that we can think of who are better at debating than I am. But this concerns me about what Christians believe and the lack of confidence that they often have in their own belief. And sometimes I wonder where this lack of confidence has come from, whether it means that some Christians are actually only adopting a certain set of beliefs rather than actually getting to know the person of God. It would be a bit like if I said, you know, I've been married X number of years to my wife and I love my wife and my kids, but I found out last week that she doesn't actually exist, you know, and of course, I'm not going to find out that she doesn't exist because I know her. And this is what Christians need to understand, that this is a knowledge claim. We claim that we know God, that there is a two-way conversation there. And this is an important point, which is why I've spent so long recently. I've been, I don't know whether I'm allowed to plug things or not, but I've just finished finished last night writing the last chapter of a book that I've been writing on presuppositional apologetics for that very reason.
Right.
Just to try and explain to Christians that they can have a solid ground, solid foundation to their beliefs.
Amen. We've actually had an atheist on this show say that they have a loving relationship with someone they don't know even exists, their wife. Said, I don't know whether she exists or not. So does your wife know that? Yeah, we talked about it. And then, Andrew, you talk about skepticism, and you know they're not even skeptical of their own claims. And David Wood made a great video this week on Sam Harris. Sam Harris, who atheists look to, like Andrew, you were in a hangout not long ago. You asked an atheist where they get their idea of morality, and he said, well, I get it same place Sam Harris does, so you should read Sam Harris's book, which I bought, which I am reading, and it's wonderful. It is wonderful to finally read it. because it's so simple to refute. But anyway, David Wood made this video about Sam Harris's claim that Muslims would disagree with Christians who say that Jesus was born of a virgin. And you know, what skeptic is saying, "Hey, Sam Harris is wrong"? Did any skeptic at anybody did anybody say, "Wait a minute, Sam is wrong"? Nobody did. But that's not what the Muslim folks believe. They believe Jesus was born of a virgin, and David Wood made a great video and called out those who claim to be skeptics when they're not even skeptical of other people's information. So that was a good point.
Well, give the context there. Sam Harris argued that, or put a tweet out saying that if he was wrong in any way, he wanted to be corrected. And so David Wood made the video. I haven't seen Sam Harris correct himself yet and state that he was wrong in believing that Muslims would want to kill you for believing that Jesus was virgin born, since that's not what Islam teaches. As you read Sam Harris's book, one of the things I find so interesting, depending on the edition you read, he'll actually make the argument, and he'll use Islam as the example, but he'll make the argument that if you have a belief that you cannot separate from your actions, then we have a moral responsibility to kill people like that. That's what his argument, and he came under fire, so in a later edition, he actually put that in the endnotes. So the question is this: Sam, do you really believe that? If he says yes, can we start with you?
Yeah, I got the latest version, and what I like is he says that our moral standards will evolve as our knowledge is gaining, and that's been my argument when I have been in discussion / debate with non-believers. Is when they question the morality of God in the Old Testament, I'm like, well, when we make moral decisions, don't you think, the more you know about the situation, or what could or could not, or is or is not about any situation, the more knowledge you have, the better you can make a choice that would be considered moral. Well, yeah, that's true. And Sam Harris makes the point that the more knowledge you have, the better, closer you'll get to a objective moral standard. And who has, according to my worldview, who has all knowledge? So yeah, he is the moral standard because he has all knowledge.
The thing I find interesting about that view of Sam Harris is there was somebody a generation ago who had the same belief. I don't know if you ever heard of him, Adolf Hitler. You ever hear of that guy? He had the same beliefs that, morals can change and evolve. And we saw how that worked.
Now, the Bible, of course, tells us that there is an absolute morality. And it tells us in Romans 2 that everybody has a conscience, which actually enables them to know the difference between right and wrong. Everybody knows the difference between right and wrong, but some people claim that they don't. And of course, what we read in Romans 1 is that everybody knows God. It's simply that some will suppress that truth in unrighteousness. But it's interesting, you brought up that issue of the Sam Harris DVD, Sam Harris video, and so on. Back in England, I had a sort of similar experience because you remember the probably the best known atheist is English, a man called Richard Dawkins, and he wrote a book published in 2006 called The God Delusion. Remember that book? And of course, I was looking forward to getting hold of that book, actually, because not that I thought it was going to make me into an atheist, but I thought at least there would be some meat in it, that I would be able to get hold of and at least be challenged by in order to build up an argument against it. But that turned out not to be the case. And there are two principal things in his book which were really very easy to refute. One was that Dawkins uses a great deal of the Bible but he quotes it out of context, and it was quite easy to go through that and explain that and show what it really meant. And secondly, there's a lack of logic, and I developed a talk which I called Deconstructing Dawkins, where I went through those 2 points, his use of scripture, refuting those bits, and then the second half of the talk was really a lesson on logical fallacies, and I gave a list of logical fallacies, illustrating each one of them with quotes from the God Delusion. And this talk became sort of quite well known in Britain at the time, and Richard Dawkins himself was doing a documentary series called The Genius of Charles Darwin, and his film company contacted me asking if I would like, because they'd heard that I was doing this talk in London at a time that was convenient for them, would they mind if they filmed that documentary? Well, I mean, to cut a long story short, there were quite a lot of discussions as to how that would be done and how the rights of that filming would be done. But in the end, yes, his film company came and filmed it. And when the producer came in, he said, "Oh, by the way, Richard Dawkins is sat in the van outside. Can he come in and listen to it? Listen to the talk?" So we said, "Yes, of course. It's a public meeting. He's perfectly entitled to do so." So he came in and he heard that talk. And by the way, just as an aside there, I made sure that the last 10 minutes of the talk was the presentation of the gospel. So I don't know whether Richard Dawkins has heard the gospel before, but I can tell you that he's heard it at least once. And I went through those points, and I chatted to him afterwards, and he was gracious enough to say, "Yeah, you were very fair in the points that you made." He didn't concede them, obviously. You know, he was understandably uncomfortable, but he was gracious enough to say, "You were fair in the points that you made." So he'd seen those. I'd seen him making notes, but I've since heard him give his talks and make exactly the same comments, exactly the same arguments that I refuted in that talk. Now, who am I? You know, I'm nowhere near as well known as he is, but I know he was there. I know I saw him taking notes, and as I said, I know he said that I was fair in the comments that I made. But it certainly didn't have any effect on the arguments that he uses.
Okay, so Paul, let me ask you this. You said that it was you at least know he heard the gospel that day. There are many, definitely in Mixler, many who are listening in who would profess to be atheists. What is the gospel, Paul Taylor?
The gospel. Let me put it this way, because this is the way that I put it in that particular talk, and it's a way that many of you as Christians will be familiar with, because I started to explain about it. He commented on the commandments in the Old Testament, so we had a look at those, and I said, you know, if you look at those commandments, we see that we've actually fallen short of those commandments, which is what we read in Romans, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. People need to know what those comments mean, what it means to say we've fallen short of the glory of God. Well, the glory of God is reflected in the moral law. This is the standard of good and evil. So, you know, I just sort of asked rhetorically, because I couldn't get answers back from the audience, but just asked rhetorically to comment to them, well, you know that you've told lies. Everybody here has told lies. Probably some of you have told lies even today. And so that makes you a liar, because and it means that you've broken the 9th commandment. And it's quite likely that in your life you've taken something that doesn't belong to you, that belongs to somebody else. Well, that's theft. And so if you've broken the commandment that says you shall not steal, which is the 8th commandment, the 7th commandment says you shall not commit adultery, and you might breathe a sigh of relief and say, well, I've not done that, but actually, although some of you might say, well, yes, I have, but those of you who say I haven't done that, Jesus made that standard very clear when he said whoever looks at somebody with lust in their hearts has committed adultery in their heart. So it's very likely then that people have committed that sin in their heart. So you look at the 1st commandment where it says you shall have no other gods before me, and you start to build up a picture that we have broken the commandments. And even if you've only broken one of them, That's James says in his epistle that if you're guilty of one of them, you're guilty of all of them. It's a bit like saying, I've got a big tank of water, and we'll just put one tiny little drop of raw sewage in that tank, and as far as I'm concerned, that tank is probably unfit to drink from that point on. And it's the same with this. If it were true that you'd only committed one little sin in your life, it still makes you less than perfect, less than the glory of God. And therefore we stand before God guilty, because we're sinners, we've broken his law, we stand before him guilty. Since we're guilty rather than being not guilty, that means that the judge of all the earth has the right to decide what happens to us after we die, whether we're going to heaven or to hell. And therefore we deserve to go to hell. And there's the bad news. But of course the gospel means good news. The bad news is that I deserve to go to hell, and every person who's listening in deserves to go to hell, because we've broken God's law, and therefore he is justifiably angry with that. But God doesn't actually want to send us to hell, which is why he sent his son, who didn't commit any sin, who lived a perfect life among us, but died for my sins and for other people's sins. He took the punishment that I deserved, and because of that, that punishment has been made, and therefore God can legally say that I have the right to go free. I can be legally declared not guilty because of that. And what I have to do then is to repent of my sin, to acknowledge that sin, and to turn away from it and put my trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's what the Bible says is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Amen. I like Paul Taylor.
And he likes you now that you use a real name. Now that Facebook forced you.
Yeah, Facebook forced me, and then the story behind that. They made it so that you could complain if somebody wasn't using their real name, and that's what people did. They must have done, because Facebook said, we don't think that's your real name. So I used Tim, Bible Thumping Wingnut, and they accepted that for a while, and for a couple of months, and then they said, no, that's not your name, and I changed it a couple times, and then they just shut down my Facebook until I sent them a photocopy of my license to prove who I was, and then I had to put my real name on. But they made it so that you can't complain anymore if someone is using a name that's not theirs. And you know why they did that? They did that because of a group, I forget, we talked about it on the podcast, Len and I did, of drag queens, I think in Vegas, who used their stage names on Facebook to protect themselves in their personal lives. And they said that it was infringing on their right to identify as the person that they want to, and it was for their own protection.
I don't have a problem with people having a right to use an alias. It's something that authors do and musicians do on different times, and I don't have a problem with that. It's also, of course, perfectly possible that there could be a friend request that I've accepted at some point. Unlikely, because it's normally people I've met face to face, but it could be possible that there's somebody who's using a very normal sounding name, but it's not their real name. Everybody has the right to do that, and I don't disagree with the right to do that, but I also have the right not to accept people's friends if I don't want to.
Yeah, I understand.
Tim, you have that with another person, that you have someone in my family who has not accepted your friend request because that person doesn't know you yet, and you're going to meet that person where? In April at Ohio Fire.
He's going?
Oh yeah, that person will definitely be there.
Oh.
Because that person is driving me to the airport.
Oh, I see. But I just thought it was interesting. I wasn't really given that story because of Paul not taking my friend request, but I wasn't allowed to identify as Bible Thumping Wingnut. But then when the drag queens had Facebook take their Facebook accounts down, they made a formal complaint to Facebook, and Facebook changed their policy because the drag queens wanted to use their aliases.
That's because they're terrorists.
Well,
Right?
maybe
Everyone's afraid to say anything against them.
maybe Tim, you should have called yourself Betty Wingnut. Maybe they would have accepted that.
Hey, I wanna show a video. I know that I was coming across as a jerk for the first 50 minutes of this video. I know that, and it was because I was using an argument that is employed by those that choose to be ultimate skeptics, and it's very annoying, very annoying. And let me do a share screen here, and I will play the Dillahunty Dodge video. Have you seen this, Paul Taylor? I don't think you have. Have you?
I don't think so.
Here is a video I made. This is parts of Matt Slick engaging with Matt Dillahunty on the Bible Thumping Wingnut show on the. It was happened about a year ago, maybe 13 months ago.
If there's no God, then that which is in the universe must be naturalistically based. It must operate out of the laws of physics and/or energy and everything else that's a property of the universe, right?
Not necessarily.
No? So there's something else besides the universe out there?
I don't know. I'm saying that if you give me two options and I say that it doesn't fit under either one, and your response is, what's the third one? You're then looking for a label, and the label is irrelevant. I don't know that they are things by nature.
We move on and see what these things are. Let's run through this discussion, see if we can figure it out.
I don't have an answer.
But is logic a process of the mind?
Well, it depends on what you mean by logic.
Do you experience the laws of logic?
I don't know what you mean by experience. I mean,
laws, the particular instances of the universals. Would you agree with that?
I don't know.
I'm just curious about something. We'll get back into this. Are you a materialist, a naturalist, or what?
Well, once again, you want to put labels on stuff to be explained. It may be the case that there is no explanation. Well, I don't know what it would take to convince me. I'm going to say I don't have an explanation. And
so what kind of evidence do you think would be manifested from a transcendental being?
I have no. Well, I don't know. And magical pixies have given me a personal revelation that account for logical absolutes and the primacy of reality.
Okay. What are magical pixies?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
Tell me exactly what you believe about the universe. Is it all that exists or not?
I don't know whether the universe is all that exists or not.
Okay. Do you presuppose God exists or does not exist?
Neither.
Okay. So about God, what would you say?
Which God? I don't care what you think a true Christian is.
Do it?
I'm not presupposing a thing. My thing is that I presuppose that these things are true because I don't know what would convince me. And my position is I'm not going to believe anything.
How do you know that's true?
I'm not playing this game with you. I'm not convinced that a why they exist is even a cogent question. So I'm not begging the question because I'm not offering an explanation for it. I'm not convinced that why is a cogent question. It may or may not be. We're done. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Yeah. The Dillahunty Dodge.
And there you have it. The best of the Dillahunty Dodge.
That was great. And for folks that weren't paying attention to that early part, that's what Tim and I were doing. That's all we were doing for 50 minutes.
It's annoying.
Yeah, and
we're going to get all kinds of hate comments, more than usual.
All right, so Tim, let me ask you a question. Do you do these Sunday night hangouts because you want to debate people?
Well, it depends on your definition of debate.
No, because this is the thing. People need to know. You and I come on here. Matt Slick comes on here. Paul Taylor's on tonight. When we have engagements, I mean, this is why I kind of feel bad with Hogtie. I mean, I hope he comes back. We've had good conversations with him in the past, but we're looking to have honest dialogue. And when you get people that just, I don't know that, I'm not making any claims. I don't know. I'm not certain of that. I can't be certain of anything. I'm not saying what I believe. It's, like Paul had earlier. well, it depends on what you do, how you're going to define that, how you're going to do this. You know, they're just not being honest. You know, and truthfully, I think the reason they have to employ a technique like that is because they cannot defend what they believe, and they know it. That's why they resort to that. We come on. You may not like the evidence we give. You may not like the answers we give. You may not like the statements we make, but at least we're supporting them. We're not dodging the issue. We're not trying to hide away and be like, well, let's see if we can avoid it. The reality is, whether you like our answers or not, those are our answers. But we're answering. We're not dodging.
Thank you, Paul Taylor, for coming on. Thank you, Andrew Rappaport. Next week, I believe, Matt Slick will be back. And for those of you who want to know more about Paul Taylor, where do they go, Paul? You got a website, some more information on what you're
Yes,
doing?
I'm the director of the Mount St. Helens Creation Center, so you can go to mshcreationcenter.org. The MSH stands for Mount St. Helens, so it's mshcreationcenter.org.
Great. And Striving for Eternity is strivingforeternity.org. You can find out more about Andrew. He's got all kinds of great teaching series on YouTube and also on the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, which Bible Thumping Wingnut is a ministry of Striving for Eternity. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Whether you are an unbeliever or a believer, I pray that God would bless you. If you're a believer, I pray that He would bless you with all the riches of the knowledge of who He is. And the same goes for those who reject Christ as God right now. I pray that He would reveal Himself to you. I pray that you would, let me be consistent. I know that He's revealed Himself to you. I pray that He would bring you to repentance and faith. And that's why we do this. We do this to encourage the saints, and also in hopes that God would bring those that aren't Christians to repentance and faith. That's why we do this. Because there's a whole lot of other things I'd like to be doing right now, other than coming on here every Sunday night. It's something that I really want to do, and the Lord has blessed it. So we're going to continue live on Mixlr. The link to listen on Mixlr is the link to the chat, which is in the description of this video. I don't know if Paul Taylor will hang out for much longer. We'll leave that up to him. But Paul, just so you know, as soon as I stop this broadcast, we will continue to be live. The audio will be on another platform. So thanks for watching, and until next week, take care.